Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. If we haven't met yet, I'm Kate Hanley, the Director of Sustainability for the town of Concord, and I'm so excited to be kicking off Climate Preparedness Week with presentations from not one, but two longtime climate reality leaders and mentors. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to tell you a little bit about Climate Preparedness Week. For the second year, Concord is recognizing this week as Climate Preparedness Week, which is a nationwide initiative organized by CREW, Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. And so the Sustainability Division and the Concord Free Public Library are bringing you virtual and socially distant content for the next week. So I invite you all to join us for adult and children's programming. You can see the full schedule of events at concordma.gov/climateprep. So let's get to it. I'm joined today by Keith Bergman and Harriet Sugarman, two climate reality leaders and mentors. Keith and Harriet are going to share with us the reality of climate change and how we can talk to our kids about it. So thanks for being here. First, I'd like to introduce Keith Bergman, who lives right here in Concord. Keith was one of the first 50 trained by former Vice President Al Gore and the Climate Reality Project in Tennessee in September 2006. He has served as Climate Reality Mentor since 2007, was a mentor lead for both global trainings held in 2020, and is on the leadership team of the Boston Metro chapter of Climate Reality. Keith is recently retired after 37 years as a municipal manager in Massachusetts. He volunteers as an International City County Management Association Senior Advisor for Massachusetts and is past president of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the regional planning agency for 101 cities and towns in Metro Boston. Keith also holds a master's in city and regional planning from the Harvard Kennedy School, and a perfect example of how very small our world is was a classmate of my dad. And Keith is also a graduate of Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where he studied political science, not climate science, and is a firm believer that sound public policy should be based on truth, no matter how inconvenient. Keith, we are so excited to hear from you today. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Kate, and I'm delighted to get to do this for Concord Climate Preparedness Week, and especially glad to have my longtime friend and fellow mentor from Climate Reality, Harriet Sugarman. I'm on the leadership of the Boston Metro chapter. Harriet's with the New York Metro chapter, and we've mentored together many times over the years in person and lately online on global trainings. So happy to be here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, thanks very much, Kate. I'm delighted to be here to present the Climate Reality Project Truth in 10 slideshow. First, I want to say we're all volunteer climate activists whose acts of leadership spread awareness and drive action and support solutions for climate change. But perhaps our Climate Reality folks are most well known for giving slideshows on the climate crisis and its solutions that are based on the one famous by our founder, former Vice President Al Gore, in the 2006 Academy Award-winning documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. And to reach even more audiences, there's an updated and abbreviated version called Truth in 10, which ideally can be presented in 10 minutes. So I'm happy to try to do that for Concord's Climate Preparedness Week. And you know, it was 14 years ago this week that Mr. Gore trained the very first class. There were 50 of us on his barn and on the Gore farm in Carthage, Tennessee. I'm sitting in the front row, second from the left. And in recent years, this climate reality tradition has continued right here in Concord at the birthplace of Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau Farm has often hosted Climate Reality Boston Metro chapter for meetings and presentation boot camps. And now there are over 100 Climate Reality chapters and over 30 campus core chapters across the United States and 11 international branches of climate reality across the globe. And in fact, climate reality went global this summer with the first virtual trainings led by Mr. Gore. Held online due to COVID restrictions, we were able to bring together over 10,000 trainees from around the world and brought our total number to over 27,000 who have been trained since 2006. So let's begin the Truth in 10 slideshow with this picture called the Blue Marble. It's the most published photograph in all of history and shows our beautiful home planet. And regarding the climate crisis, we're going to start with 3 questions that must be asked. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? The first question, must we change, is one that requires a little explanation of what the climate crisis is all about. This is the horizon of the Earth and illustrates how thin the sky is. It's not the vast expanse you see when you look up from the ground, but it's a fragile layer that surrounds our planet. And the problem is because the sunlight that comes through that layer and warms up the Earth, and some of that heat that's absorbed is radiated back into space in the form of infrared radiation. And some is trapped by the natural greenhouse layer, which is a good thing. It keeps temperatures within a healthy boundary here on Earth. But the problem is that we're thickening that greenhouse gas layer by spewing 152 million tons of man-made heat-trapping gas into the layer every single day. And that traps more of the outgoing infrared. And where does the greenhouse gas pollution come from? Well, it comes from a lot of sources. Transportation is a big one. In fact, in Massachusetts, transportation is the largest sector, the source of global greenhouse gas. Thawing of the permafrost is another, burning of forests, mining, methane from landfills. But the biggest source by far is our dependence on fossil fuels, which results in all this CO2 being spewed into the sky. And you can see that it's really gone up since after World War II. As a result, the extra heat that's trapped by global warming pollution, it drives temperatures up. And by the way, we're likely to see a 70% likelihood of the hottest year ever measured will be this year. 19 of the 20 hottest have been since 2001. And the 5 hottest years have been the last 5 years. Causing us all to ask, as Henry David Thoreau did, well, what's the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? And comparing Thoreau's field notes from the 1850s to more recent research by Richard Primack in his book Walden Warming, we can see that woody plants here in Concord are leafing out 18 days earlier now than in Thoreau's time. It's April 20th on average now compared to May 8th, a century and a half ago. And this year, Massachusetts just experienced its hottest summer on record. If we step back and look at the Earth as a whole and see that 71% of the planet is covered by the ocean, 93% of all that extra heat that's being trapped goes into the ocean. And the ocean temperatures are setting a new high record almost every year, and we're likely to see another all-time high this year. An important point made by Pope Francis and others is that deterioration of the environment through depletion of resources, of pollution, destruction of ecosystems, has the biggest impact on poor people and also communities of color. That's why in the United States, we have the new Poor People's Campaign, and the Climate Reality Project has partnered with that campaign. And if you look at the 10 counties most vulnerable to flooding and other disasters, they are 81% minority in population. And the higher temperatures are associated with more fires. Of course, we're seeing that right now in California and out west, hundreds of fires. And the reinsurance companies are certainly paying heed because they have to pay out when these disasters strike. And you see the pattern that they've been following. It's also melting the ice. Here's an unnamed huge glacier in Greenland 85 years ago and what it looks like now. If you look at NASA's measurement of how much ice has melted and fallen into the sea in Greenland, it's melting much faster than they thought, 4 times faster. And it's coming from the so-called permanent ice sheet. Same thing is happening in Antarctica. You see how the melting of ice there has accelerated dramatically. And if you look at the top 10 cities at risk from sea level rise, here are the top 10 ranked by population at risk. Here's the top 10 rated by assets at risk, with Miami number 1 and New York, Newark is number 3 on the top 10. And it's also a national security issue. The U.S. Defense Department has for many years warned about the flood and water shortages, pandemic disease, and refugee flows caused by the climate crisis. And the climate crisis is also a health emergency. Not least because tropical diseases are moving north. Airline travel has a lot to do with this, but the climate conditions are changing where these diseases can take root and become endemic. Some of these diseases come because we're encroaching on previously wild areas where millions of viruses are still located and we haven't encountered them before. We have to focus on the racial injustice that's been seen in the excess death rate for Black Americans from COVID-19. And that's from excessive poverty, lack of access to health care, the living conditions, non-zoomable jobs, a lot of factors that we have to address this ethical crisis. And it's not only people that are affected by the climate crisis. We're in danger of losing up to half of all the living species that we share this planet with. And it all adds up, all the costs of the climate crisis. And it's the #1 threat to the global economy. So, must we change? Yes. Second question, can we change? Well, luckily, the answer to that question is yes as well, because we have the solutions at hand. Let's look at green energy progress that we've made. There was a projection in 2000 that worldwide wind capacity would reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. In reality, by last year, we exceeded that by a factor of 22 times. Here's the exponential curve showing the use of wind energy capacity increasing. Here's a solar energy progress projection in 2002 that the market would grow by 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. We exceeded that goal by 17 times. And by last year, it was exceeded by 121 times. Here's an even steeper curve, the growth of solar photovoltaic installations. And it's because the cost of these technologies is coming down quickly. We're not going to run out of solar energy. We get as much in 1 hour as the entire global economy needs for a full year. And we're seeing battery storage improve. Here's the future projections for this new $1 trillion industry. And we're also seeing electric vehicles begin to displace the internal combustion vehicles. This exponential curve is getting very exciting for a number of electric cars on the road. And of course, here in Concord, we know that solar panels can recharge the battery in your Prius Prime in the time it takes you to walk around Walden Pond twice. It does for me, anyway. So can we change? Yes. Will we change? This is the most important question, and it's kind of the main reason why we're here. The Paris Agreement indicated that the Navy will change because every nation in the world agreed to go down to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century. And yes, the current president says he wants to withdraw, but by law, that cannot happen until the day after this upcoming election on November 3rd. And a new president could just give 30 days notice and we're right back in the agreement. Meanwhile, the business and investment communities are taking a look at the fact that fossil fuels are not a very good investment anymore. Lots of them are divesting in order to stop losing money on fossil fuels. And we're also seeing state governments, including Massachusetts, take the lead, and many of them are moving faster than required by the Paris Agreement. And we're seeing a lot of cities and towns take the lead also, including Concord. It's a very hopeful sign. In bipartisan Massachusetts, net zero by 2050 is a stated goal, both of our Republican governor and the democratically controlled houses of the state legislature. So keep an eye on the conference committee bill that will dictate our net zero roadmap to 2050, coming soon. And here in Concord, our town is committed to making our community more sustainable and resilient. Here's the Sustainable Concord Town's Climate Action and Resilience Plan, issued, Kate, by your office this summer, so congratulations. And Sustainable Concord's the roadmap for meeting town meeting's commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And milestones along the way include 100% carbon-free electricity by 2030 through Concord's town-owned municipal electric light plant. And we've got the young generation that's demanding a brighter future. These are students from Concord heading to last year's climate strike at Boston City Hall Plaza, one of many thousands of marches by young people. So join those who are using their voices and casting their votes and using their choices in the marketplace to fight for the future. Use your voice, use your vote, use your choices. Speak truth to power like your world depends on it. Because actually, your world does depend on it. Thanks very much. And Keith will stop the screen share. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith. That was great. Now I want to transition to our next speaker, Harriet Sugarman. Though Harriet was selected as a 2020 New York City Climate Hero, she was also a 2019 featured speaker at the Global Engagement Summit at the UN headquarters. Harriet is a sought-after speaker recognized nationally as an influencer and connector in the climate movement. Harriet is also the executive director of Climate Mama, an online community that reaches individuals in over 110 countries and all 50 states. She chairs the Climate Reality New York City Metro chapter, was a recipient of the Climate Reality 2017 Green Ring Award, and is profiled in Mr. Gore's 2017 book, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. Her writing and thought pieces on climate solutions appear in national and regional publications, online and in print. And Harriet's book, Talking to Your Kids About Climate Change, Turning Angst to Action, was released this past spring. Harriet has worked with for more than 25 years in Canada and the US with governments, international organizations, and educational institutions on climate and sustainability issues. She has worked with the IMF, United Nations, and currently teaches World Sustainability and Climate Change and Society at the Ramapo College of New Jersey. We are so excited to have you, Harriet. Welcome to Concord. We're so excited to hear from you. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Kate, and thank you so much, Keith. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to be with you both. As Keith shared, we have been friends for many years and done a few things together, but we haven't done something quite like this, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity. And I guess, starting with, wow, the information that Keith shared with us it's up to date, it's current, it's complicated, and it's difficult, and it's heartbreaking in many ways, right? For us and for our children. And so how do we share some of that knowledge? I mean, I loved how he shared the facts and the reality on the ground in Concord about the positive things that are happening and what's leading. And that's really important that we help our children see that too. And most important, to see people taking action and doing things. But how do we also address for them the realities that we're facing on the ground? And I think that what's really important when talking to our kids about the climate crisis is that we begin by sharing the truth. And the truth can be tough, the truth can be difficult, but no matter what age your child is, they're feeling it. They're feeling it through your emotions. They're seeing it from what's happening around them. I'm sharing my slides with this quote from my book, and just substituting climate change for COVID-19 and racism. We're dealing with multi-sectoral issues at the same time that are all intersecting, and we can't separate them. We can't say, here's the environment, here's the climate crisis, here's racial injustice over here, here's the global pandemic, because they're all related. And so being able to talk about them together and share our concerns, our hopes, and our actions with our kids is really critical. And making those connections for them is critical as well. Keith shared a picture of some of the young people from Concord that were going last year when we could travel easily to the climate march in Boston. And I know many young people will be marching again this coming week, maybe where they live in a socially distanced, safe way, where they can, or online. But for me, what's changed a lot in my work, because I've been working specifically on in the parent voice on the climate crisis since I did my training in 2007, a few months after Keith. He was one of the mentors at one of those trainings as well. As I jumped in a couple years later, because you come away from these trainings with this strong feeling of, wow, this is really happening. It's not happening over there. It's not happening, 7 generations down the road. It's happening to me, and it's happening now. Even 12 years ago, when I did the training, or 13 years ago now, that was evident. So it isn't new what we're learning. What's new is the speed and the intensity of it. It's getting worse. It's getting worse much faster than climate scientists expected. And they have more models and more ability to show that that's happening too. But again, what we know is that, yeah, it's happening. It's real. We're causing it to happen. There are things we can do about it. So holding on to that and reminding our children is really important. And our children are jumping out in front of us. We are seeing youth leaders the world over. And again, not that they weren't there when Keith and I first did these trainings. There were young people we met at those trainings in Tennessee that we went to that were amazing, that were outspoken, that were raising their voices, demanding action on the climate crisis. But what I think was different then to now is that the world wasn't listening. And what we've seen the last few years is young people being heard and being invited to be at the table. And then around that, what I've seen with the climate parent movement is that parents are saying, wow, my kids are waking up. I'm seeing kids taking action. I need to understand what's going on too. I need to have an answer for them. I need to be able to be there where needed. And for each child, it's going to be different. Are we needed in front of them? Are we needed beside them? Are we needed behind them? Holding their hand, giving them opportunities, creating places for them to speak, or just sitting back and watching them go, because each child will be different, and we will be surprised by even our youngest, who, if we can create that opportunity for them to voice what they're thinking and feeling, we need to listen to them. And then some of them will want to do more outside, and some of them will just want us to hold them and tell us what they're feeling. And so I share in my book as well, but for our Climate Mama organization, our motto for many years has been very simple. It's things that you probably learned from your parents. It's things you probably teach your children, or as a teacher talk about too. We want to tell the truth. Actions speak louder than words. And somehow we have to come to terms with not being afraid. So when it comes to telling the truth about the climate crisis, I think an important thing to remind our kids at, again, whatever ages, and remind ourselves, because there's so much misinformation out there, you know, depending where you get your news, you're going to hear one thing or another. We need to come to a place where we trust in science, right? We trust in peer-reviewed data from science. And scientists are telling us, those scientists that study the climate crisis, as I said before, it's real, it's happening now, we're causing it to happen, but there are things we can do about it. So we need to trust in science and then move on from there. We need to be honest in telling the truth, but we need to be age appropriate. So what you're going to tell your 4-year-old is different than what you're going to tell your 8-year-old or your 14-year-old or your 32-year-old. That's going to be different. And so we need to also, whether it's temper what we're saying or sharing more, and being also, as I said, listening to our kids, because we can learn from them as well. It needs to be age appropriate, and we can talk about that more, perhaps, Kate, or I'm happy to share more about that later as well too. And then in telling the truth, reminding our children and ourselves about the power of the individual, but the need and the impact of the collective. And so what I mean by that is, right, we need systemic change. We need great changes. And sometimes that freezes us. That's like the climate crisis. Oh my gosh, that's too huge. I can't help it. I can't get my arms around it. What am I going to do? Let me bury my head in the sand. Well, you know what? Now we have a real world, real life example that just happened. It's happening now with COVID-19, where we are seeing the individual, we're seeing our communities, our families, right? We're helping one another. We're supporting first responders. We're making masks. We're bringing food. We are doing things as community as we live this global pandemic. And then we are seeing both our national government and our state governments and our local governments commit money and resources that we never thought could be committed, trillions and trillions of dollars at the national level for an emergency. Well, we need to do that for the climate emergency. So to be able to say it can't be done, we are seeing it happen in real time, and so are our children. And we need to point to that, because that is good news and that is positive. When confronted with a global crisis, we can come to where we need to be to address it. We just need to recognize the crisis at hand. And we are dealing with a climate emergency. And unfortunately, politics is getting in the way of that. This is not and should not be a political or a partisan issue. It's happening to all of us. It's happening now, and it's happening to many people first and worst. And again, it's not something happening over there. So we need to find a way to come to terms with that and help our children understand it. And then actions speak louder than words. Well, first of all and foremost, and I think as we are learning with COVID-19, as we all deal with social distancing, being inside, what it's done to our jobs, our homes, etc., we need to take care of ourselves first and our community. And if we're not well, if we are feeling depressed, sad, how are we going to help our children come to terms with that? So letting them understand we have those feelings too, because that's the reality of the situation. That's okay. And if we feel incredibly sad, we need to work through that, because it's incredibly sad. Keith told us we're losing 50% of the species on our planet. We have put our planet in the 6th mass extinction. That's overwhelming. It's also in some weird way awe-inspiring that we as a singular species have created such an impact on a planet that's been here for almost 4 billion years, that will continue to be here long beyond us. We're here for that amount of time. We've been on this planet, impacting it, and our planet's showing us, hey, maybe it's time you left, because we were just fine until you got here. So, I mean, that's a reality. What we do, and that's incredible, and to remind our kids too, we are alive at a moment in time on our planet where we have choices that will impact the future of the human species and all species on it. We can, and 2020, for all of its craziness, it seems to be that transition point, that year where we can go wild on renewable energy, looking after things, taking action at the local level, etc. Or we can choose to business as usual, and we know where that's going to lead us as well too. So we are alive at an amazing, incredible moment in history, and we need to jump forward with that chance. And then trusted messengers. You know what, we're dealing in a time where who is the messenger and who do we believe? And again, it gets mixed up in media and different politics. Your children trust you. You're their trusted messenger, whether you're their teacher, you're their neighbor, you're the person that they know. And we need to be able to convey all of this to our children. And finally, don't be afraid, right? Well, that's easier said than done because it's a scary time that we're living in many, many ways. So as Keith and Kate both are prime examples, involve yourself in your government systems. Be involved, help run, help move forward your own community. And that's a positive example to show for our children. We need to follow up and be prepared. We need to do things, but then show our children we're following through, and literally and figuratively, we need to plant seeds and nurture them. This is a really crucial time right now to show our children too, as Keith said, that we are voting for people that have a climate plan, that are prepared to deal with what's happening. This is Climate Preparedness Week. Clearly, your community understands the need to have a plan because it's not just mitigating what's happening. We need to adapt to the real changes that are happening to us on the front lines. So, and then I just want to share with you, we need to speak up at every opportunity. This is me with neighbors, with my daughter when she was young. Again, a bunch of moms and their kids going to a grocery store and saying no BPA in your cans. And you know what? These things are all connected. At marches, at different events, we need to speak up at every opportunity. This was the 2014 Climate March, where in New York City, over 400,000 people came into the streets. And I know in Boston, tens of thousands of people came into the streets. And we showed the world, that was a year before the Paris Agreement, that we care, that we want action, and we can create action. And finally, as a reminder how fast time flies. In 2018, we heard from the International Panel on Climate Change that we had till 2030, till we would, if we did nothing, where we would pass irreversible turning points with our planet. The world wasn't going to end. The world's not going to end in 2030, but it's going to be much more difficult if we don't take action now. When I did the training earlier in 2007, my children were in elementary school. Last year, when my children left to go to college, I couldn't take a picture now because they left at different times and it's a very strange time, but 12 years as a parent, when you see your children, I know if your children are very small and you're watching this, it may seem like it takes forever. Let me tell you, it goes really fast. And we don't have time to waste. So thank you both for sharing and shining examples on positive things that communities and individuals can do. And we need to jump forward and tell our children not to be afraid and show them wonderful examples like what's happening in Concord of things that we can do to address the climate crisis, and demand those that can take giant steps, they must do so too. So if we can only take small steps, that's okay. We all need to be moving forward, but those that can go big, they have to. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now.
Thank you, Harriet. That was awesome. I'm so excited to dig into some questions with the two of you. First up, what is really top of my mind, and I think top of mind for a lot of folks because it's happening now, are the wildfires out west. I mean, we even see the smoke and the haze here on the East Coast, which I think for a lot of folks is kind of mind-blowing. But I still think that it feels kind of far away to some people. And so I guess for each of you, for Keith, how do you communicate the urgency of climate action to those who don't feel the same need for fast and bold action? And for Harriet, these events can be pretty scary, I think, even for me as an adult. And so I'm wondering how you talk about these big climate events with children in a way that doesn't scare them.
Well, thanks for the question, Kate, and thanks again for the opportunity. One of the great things about the Climate Reality Project is that we are in constant touch with all of our fellow climate leaders. So there's no issue that leaders are facing in some other part of the country or some other part of the world that we aren't immediately exposed to as well, and to know that things are happening everywhere, and that we are all in this together. We try to communicate information that's occurring all around the world, and it's that education that's an important part of what we do. And so I'm grateful to be able to stay in touch with Harriet and all of my fellow mentors and climate leaders across the globe, who keep us informed with firsthand accounts of what they're facing, and that helps bring it home to many of us, and we are all in this together to solve the climate crisis.
Yeah, and we are all in it to solve the climate crisis together. And I think more and more, Kate, it's getting hard to not feel the realities of what are happening, because even though the West Coast is far away and we do see the smoke, but maybe everybody doesn't recognize that what it is. Those of us that do, it's really scary. But we have an uncle, a grandmother, a cousin that lives there. And our kids have those relations there. Or Snowmageddon happens in Boston, and how do you yeah, it snows, but it doesn't dump snow like that, like, in one fell swoop. School isn't closed for days at a time. Things are happening directly to us. And so how do we not be afraid? Well, I think admitting to our kids that we are, it's a bit scary, but reminding them that there are people around the world working on this, and show them examples in your own community of what's happening. Show them examples of other children, because sometimes having that agency, right, as a young person, especially a very young person or somebody who can't vote, you feel powerless. There are many amazing examples of local kids, I'm sure, and kids all across our country and across the world taking action, whether it's demanding solar panels be put on their town halls, which I know in Massachusetts happened with some kids a few years ago and is portrayed in a film in an organization called Young Voices for the Planet, or if it's, young people leading marches or demanding from their local leadership that, they create a better system for composting. What all of those things are levels, they may not seem as dire as, is composting important? Well, yeah, maybe kids can relate to that in more of a direct way. So it's scary. I too feel your fears, Kaden, but my hope is because of people like Keith, because of what you're doing as a sustainability director for your town, and that the town's committed to a position like that. Not all towns have, right? So I think pointing those things out to our children, they know, your next door neighbor who actually is doing all of these things to address the climate crisis. And I think we have to give them that act of hope, right? Because hope by itself doesn't count, but the act of hope, showing them examples and having them part of that, give them opportunities to take action themselves, makes us all less fearful.
That's great. I think, one of the other things I think about is, these fires are top of the news right now, and they're certainly unprecedented, but we have experienced major climate crises before, and can seem, I think, to a lot of us who really care about this issue, like the public attention kind of fades and shifts to something else. And of course, right now, we're also in the middle of a major public health crisis. So I'm curious from both of you, your thoughts on how do we keep the attention on the importance of taking climate action?
Well, I want to offer that it's, and just looking back at the 14 years I've been volunteering with Climate Reality, there have been peaks and valleys looking at the interest of the public and in climate. There was I remember that there was great interest for a few years, and then suddenly it was a long period where climate was not getting discussed at all. And look at this year. Look at how climate is an issue that political candidates talk about. That it is at the forefront of our public discourse. As Harriet said, not simply because of the climate, but also because of COVID, that people are seeing firsthand what that science matters, and that and I think that that is captured attention at a level that seems to me to be unprecedented, and that and good thing too, because time's, the clock is ticking and time is running out.
And I would just add, Kate, too, that we need to pressure our media to report on it more, because you're absolutely right. But things in that regard, in addition to the peaks and valleys, which we've seen over the years, is we are seeing media outlets like the Los Angeles Times saying they won't report deniers anymore. It doesn't make sense. And they used to try to present both sides. There's not two sides to the argument and the reality of the climate crisis. It's happening. There's, if you've ever seen that John Oliver skit with 97 people in one side and 3 on the other of climate scientists. Well, it's overwhelming. The reality is happening. We're seeing The Guardian commit to, a major group of climate reporters. So we need to write to your local paper, write to your local news. If they are not reporting on the climate crisis, they should be, but also on the positives, because sometimes it's just bad news. We don't want to just hear bad news. We were talking ourselves before we went on about, this electric truck from Ford that's coming out in next year or the year after, and it's their most popular truck. It's a kind of gas electric and an all electric. Well, that's awesome. That's part of climate solutions. We want our kids to see those. So we want to see those news articles too, what people are working on. Yeah, we want to hear and understand, it's real and what's happening, but we also need to see that there's hope, and all those things are hope. And the media should be reporting on those stories as well.
That's great. I really love the idea of focusing on some of the positive stories, because I think a lot of times it feels very overwhelming with all the doom and gloom, and sort of focus on the solutions, I think, gives people more hope. One of the things that I think a lot of us who work on sustainability and climate hear a lot is, well, yeah, of course sustainability is really important and I really care about this, but what's it going to cost? Or, but it's too expensive, or, but we can't do that right now. And I'm curious how you both respond to those kinds of conversations.
Well, I'll start. Part of it is that, and I guess I was surprised that this wasn't more of a theme and on both sides of the political spectrum, but I'm very excited about the new green economy, and someone's going to make an awful lot of money out of that. And we're a capitalist society, and we're driven by that motive, as among others. And I think there is great economic incentive in the long term to go green. We're seeing in Massachusetts, we're seeing significant money being put on the table for helping cities and towns deal with climate change. We've got competing bills now in our 2 houses of the state legislature, but there are huge price tags. They recognize that that it does require investment, and lot of communities like Concord and elsewhere are rethinking what does their community look like when they're coping with climate change, and that there are positive steps that can be taken. There are good practices that can be done. The agency that I've been affiliated with for a dozen years or so, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, has a whole toolkit to help cities and towns deal with combating the climate crisis, including climate zoning to rezone areas that accomplish what you want to see to help make your community more sustainable. So there are lots of different avenues to pursue, and I've been very pleased to see the leadership that we've been able to get from state government during recent years, many state governments, and that's been an important part of my climate coping strategy, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and just, I mean, Keith's the expert on that. He's seen all this being done in real time in communities and towns and cities. But you know, we have to remind and show examples like that too with extreme weather events. You know, how is your stormwater management? You know, if you're not taking care of the streets, you're going on the lowest common denominator and repairing them or things like that, and don't figure out those things. So maybe there's more money that has to go in initially, but it saves you so much more money, right? And we're seeing that money be recouped very quickly as well. Before COVID, and again, leasing space in Manhattan is a whole nother issue right now, as I'm sure it is in many places. But we were watching companies that had leased space in buildings do retrofits themselves to save money, and we, some of our chapter leaders were doing this, working with law firms. The first law firm that did it put in $400,000 into a building they'd leased, had a long lease for. That money came back to them in energy savings in 1 year. So again, we just have to think in a different way, and recognize that, all of these things are going to save us money, and we need to do them too. We need to figure out, and not all of it is putting solar panels or fancy things on things. It's retrofitting homes, that's putting people to work, retrofitting buildings, a lot of things that create jobs at the same time as they save money for communities.
That's great. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to have more of that conversation about it's really saving us money and avoided costs down the line if we don't take action. So that's great. I just want to ask one more question to kind of wrap us up. You both have been in this field and have been doing amazing work and are really dedicated to tackling climate change. And, as Keith mentioned, there are kind of ups and downs, and it can feel like a bumpy path towards progress on climate sometimes. And so I always like to ask colleagues in the climate fight, what motivates you? What keeps you going?
Let me jump in. I just wrote a whole book about it. It is, I refuse to believe that my children's future is predetermined, that they won't have a positive future, that they won't have opportunities. And I know that depends on what we do right now. And some of us are doing more, and we need to continue to do that. And I can see, because sometimes we have to envision what that looks like, them finding the jobs that they love, someone who loves them as much as I do, a place where their life will be different. They are going to be living the climate crisis in a way that I didn't growing up, but I just won't accept that it's Armageddon. And so that keeps me going. And fires and red skies, we will figure out how to manage through them, and we will slow this down. We can't stop it, but we're going to slow this train down. And I firmly believe we can do that, and we will do it together.
Wow, Harriet, I absolutely agree with what you say, and I just want to share for me, it's young people have always motivated me. I have to say that my daughters, who are now 30-somethings, remind me of who was doing the recycling first in our household, and it wasn't me. And I learned from them. I have a three-year-old grandson who I think about a lot, what his life is going to be like, and what is the world that he's going to grow up in and live in. And I'm in this for him. I'm and for all of our future generations. That's what motivates me. I see boy, the young people that are motivating force behind the Green New Deal this year has just been absolutely inspiring. And I hope that, I think they're going to save us, because my baby boomer generation hasn't crossed the finish line with this task. And I just see tremendous leadership coming from the younger generations, and that is the most motivating thing for me.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. That was a positive note to end on, but I appreciate you sharing, your stories on the reality of climate, how we can talk to our kids about this, and giving us a lot of really actionable steps that all of us can take to move forward. So thank you so much for joining me, and thanks to all of you who have tuned in for this virtual presentation. I invite you to join us for other events this week for climate preparedness. And thanks again, and have a great day.